Hey everyone, this is Elenbaas from Nightlight Astrology. Happy Friday, everybody. Today we're going to take a look at Venus conjoining Saturn in the sign of Pisces, and we are going to do horoscopes for all 12 whole signs. So this will allow you to see what house the transit is landing in, and therefore what topics are likely being activated for you personally. And I recommend listening to your rising sign for this reason. This will correspond with the whole sign house version of your birth chart, which is, for many people listening to this channel, the one you use, because Hellenistic astrologers like myself encourage whole signs. But either way, you could listen to your sun sign or your rising sign and get something good out of it today. So that's our agenda. Before we get into it, remember to like and subscribe. If you're new to the channel, welcome. I hope you've been enjoying the content. Please consider subscribing if you haven't yet. It really helps us grow the channel. We're seeing if we can't get to 80,000 subscribers by the spring equinox, kind of a big goal, but why not? Let's see what we can do. You can find transcripts of any of these daily talks on the website, nightlightastrology.com. When you are on the website, be sure to check out the list of new webinars that I have coming up for the next 3 months. They have just recently been posted, and I will tell you more about them in the weeks to come, but they are up if you want to check out the webinars for February, March, and April. Some good topics coming up for my monthly webinars. All right, on that note, let us now turn our attention to the real-time clock, where we will be doing some Venus conjoining Saturn in Pisces horoscopes. Now, what I'm going to do is bring this transit through all 12 whole signs and tell you where the transit is landing based on the ascending sign. So you can, again, I recommend listening to this for your rising sign, but if you listen to your sun sign horoscope regularly, that's just fine as well. All right. Now, let's talk briefly about the timeline of this transit. Today, Friday, January 17th, we're just a day away from the conjunction with Saturn, which occurs tomorrow on the 18th. It's been applying all week. If we give it 3-degree range, you've been feeling it by the early part of this week that we're in, and then you will be feeling it if we give it 3 degrees of separation. Give it all the way till about Wednesday of next week that you'll be still feeling the transit of this planet. So that is the timeline. Oops. Now, let's put the real-time clock back up. Now, let's talk about what houses we see the conjunction landing in, and therefore what you might expect. First, let's just refresh. If you haven't yet watched the video I did on the archetypal combination of Venus and Saturn, we can see themes of hardship or difficulty, or the kind of painfulness of Venus and Saturn in things like love and relationships. And anything that Venus represents may go through some contractive moment or space in which Venus feels like she's dying or transitioning somehow. So there can be just the general sort of melancholic, painful, difficult, burdensome, prohibitive, restrictive feelings around Venus when she conjoins Saturn. However, there is also a lot of creative crystallizing that happens when Venus conjoins Saturn. Things ripen on the vine. It's like a time of artistic, creative, sensual maturation. And we reach inflection points with respect to what we love or how we love or who we're in love with. And Venus and Saturn sometimes is a little melancholic, may love the impossible or may long for something that simply cannot be. Venus-Saturn can also reflect painful but necessary growth moments in relationships, or transitions or moments of hardship that we must somehow endure with respect to who or what or how we love. All of these things can be a part of the Venus-Saturn dynamic. But either way, let's think about this as a moment of consequence, a moment of depth, and a moment of seriousness with respect to all things Venusian. So that in mind, let's start now going through our 12 whole signs. If you are an Aries rising, this is landing in your 12th house, which means you may be looking at the realm of relationships, love, art, sensuality, beauty, and the unconscious dimension, and in which we think of the 12th house, or that we think of the 12th house in relation to. So the 12th house is kind of like a blind spot. It's not a place that we always have clear or easy understanding or access to. It is also a place where unseen people or things that undermine us exist that we have to be very careful of. Venus-Saturn in the 12th can be about that difficult moment of realizing that I drink too much, or I spend too much, or I'm in relationship with someone who is not healthy for me somehow. So these are all things that could come about because of the way that the 12th house operates. It tends to operate as something that we have difficulty seeing, or that is outside of our ego's ability to control, or it might even be a force or a person within us, outside of us, that is not so great for us, or that's even undermining us. And so you want to look at the kind of unconscious dimensions of your life with respect to how Venus and Saturn is showing up. This also may be about needing to take some time for solitude or retreat. Venus Saturn in the 12th could be a little bit like, a stay-in date night, where there's a need to retreat and be in romantic or artistic solitude, or a kind of spacious, deep disconnecting with a lover even might make sense in the 12th house. All right, let's continue on into the sign of Taurus. For Taurus rising, or if you're listening for your sun sign, the Venus-Saturn conjunction takes place in the 11th house. The 11th house is the place of friends, groups, communities. And so we're looking at a conjunction that may have to do with the shifting landscape of your social life, or in the realm of things like colleagues and friends and community spaces. Venus-Saturn in this space could reflect connecting with an older or elder woman, for example, just simple Venus-Saturn kind of description. An older, wiser, and maybe veteran woman with experience, or a group of elder women who serve some important role in your life right now. This could also be about fallouts, death, transitions within certain key groups or relationships that are more social or professional. And it could also be about what is growing or maturing socially for you in relation, again, to things like communities and colleagues or groups of people. So you think about that for Tauruses right now. And it's also maybe about who or what in the community is attractive to you right now. Or sort of, there may be opportunities for harmonization. But there also could be, kind of a crossroads or difficult, weighty choices with respect to certain key relationships. Now, let's move along. Let's take a look at Gemini. If you're a Gemini sun or rising, we're looking at this in your 10th house, which is the place of your career, reputation, notoriety. It's a very visible place. Venus-Saturn could mean that there are key relationships that are changing in the workplace, maybe transitions or changes of people in power, different boss or a different position, or you're working with different people. It could be that there's love in the workplace, and that love in the workplace is also often, prohibited. And so could there be some longing for someone you work with that it's somehow impossible to have a relationship with? This is the kind of story you could see Venus and Saturn telling in this 10th house together. Venus and Saturn in the 10th house could describe a project. It could describe a new line of work. It could describe a change or shift somehow in your employment, your position, or your status. And the combination of these two could also be about, what kinds of relational challenges or hardships are you experiencing? There's weightier, deeper, heavier themes around love, relationships, and Venus in the place of work. And it could also describe something that you're feeling more committed to at work, or something that you're feeling more serious about. Interesting to watch it on that level for Geminis. For Cancers, the Venus-Saturn conjunction is taking place in the 9th house, which is the place of teachers and education, learning, and the religious or spiritual dimensions of life. How we learn and grow in wisdom, morality, virtue, all associated with the 9th house. Teachers and teaching, education, foreign places that we go to expand our mind and understand more about the world. The 9th house is a place when Venus and Saturn get together where we could be dealing with the intersection between things like faith, morality, and sexuality. You could be looking at things like paganism, feminism, animism, nature, poetry, the arts, and the intersection with mysticism, spirituality, monasticism, Hermeticism, things like that. So you get almost like a kind of artistic, spiritual alchemy theme in the 9th house. How do painting and prayer go together? Or how do things like, women, faith, and wisdom traditions go together? See, these are the kinds of combinations you might expect from Venus and Saturn in Pisces in the 9th. The combination of these two planets in the ninth could also suggest that there's something around faith, religion, and spirituality within certain key relationships is taking place, and it's more serious right now. This could also be about certain teachers and encounters with certain teachers that are more serious for one reason or another. If you're a Leo rising, Venus and Saturn will be taking place in the 8th house, you Leo sun or Leo rising. So Venus-Saturn conjoins in the 8th house, which is a place of karmic debts and obligations. This is a place where we owe people things and they owe us things. That contract, that exchange is not just about debt, and there's not always like a punitive or entrapping or entangling sense of karma in the 8th house. It's also about the authentic way in which we give and receive with other people in meaningful exchanges of value. Venus and Saturn in this house suggest a kind of exchange of value that maybe has reached its peak or is culminating or maybe even expiring, or we're looking at changes around things like money and relationships, different kinds of debts that we are either accruing or paying off in relationships that could be emotional or financial. This could also be a kind of flashpoint for changes that a partner is going through with respect to things like money or career or family or resources that they have. So don't be surprised if one of the ways this plays out for some of you out there, Leos, is with respect to things that a partner is going through. The other thing I would say about this combination is that there may be something here about various dependencies. How much should I rely on someone for something? How much should they rely on me? What's the good give and take versus what is an unhealthy form of dependency? You go from healthy interdependency to things like codependency in the 8th house when Venus and Saturn get together, and the exploration of which is which might be part of this. For Virgos, we see Virgo sun or rising having Venus and Saturn conjoining in the 7th house, the place of relationships. There is no place where we see Venus and Saturn more quintessentially about love and relationships for any horoscope than the Virgo horoscope, because it lands in the 7th house of marriage. Now, this place is not just about marriage. It's also about the interaction between our desires, our happiness, intimacy, pleasure, and other people. And so it could be a little broader than just, intimate partnerships, marriage, or relationships romantically, but could speak to the interactions we have with other people that either lead to happiness or disappointment. This could also be a combination that speaks to things that really need to be looked at, like weightier, heavier things that can't be avoided, that there's a kind of bottom line that Saturn brings in with Venus in this house and says, it's not going to be able to go on the same that it's been. There's an expiration, or there's some limit that we've reached, and some very important crossroads that we have to look at together as a couple or a partner. Or there are key relationships that I either am ready to commit myself to more seriously or move on from. So a pretty weighty experience for all of us. But for Virgos in the realm of relationships, it doesn't get more sort of Shakespearean. It really is focused on love, relationships, intimacy, pleasure, interpersonal dynamics with other people for Virgos. All right. Well, when we put Libra on the ascendant and we have a horoscope for Libra sun or rising, the Venus-Saturn conjunction takes place in the 6th house. Now, the 6th house is a place of work, sacrifice, sickness, duty, service, usually with an aura of being willing to suffer and serve. The 6th house is a place of hard work and labor. You're not going to change or transform yourself into a great musician without a lot of blood, sweat, and tears and practice. You're not going to build muscle unless you lift weights or eat the right diet. You're not going to have a meaningful relationship unless you're willing to sacrifice and learn how to negotiate conflicts. These are all difficult things to do, and all the kinds of things implied by the 6th house, which was called the joy of Mars. Venus-Saturn in this house suggests the potential for meaningful conflicts of deeper values. This is a Jupiter-ruled sign in Pisces, after all, and Jupiter is currently transiting in Libra's 9th house, a place of the higher mind and wisdom. And so I wonder in what ways relationships are being tested on the level of political or religious points of view. How much do I have in common with someone? How much ought I to have in common with someone when it comes to my morality, my philosophy? This is also a Venus-Saturn conjunction in the 6th that may speak to a process of contractive creative work. I'm disciplining myself to paint every day. I am making myself, learn something new, a new craft or skill or ability. So the willingness to sacrifice on behalf of something beautiful or something that you feel is worthwhile, the ability to heal, repair, mend, work through conflicts in relationships, or the ability to just look very seriously at what you do and don't believe, and what relationships your beliefs really need to be a part of, and where it may be okay to experience disagreements, because they're going to exist. The question might just be, to what extent is it okay that they exist? For Scorpios, we place the Venus-Saturn conjunction in your 5th house. Now, what I love about this house is a very romantic house. This was called the joy of Venus. The 5th house has to do with, in many ways, how we bring what is inside of us, our essential nature, character, creativity, into meaningful relationships with other human beings. How creatively fulfilled we feel has so much to do with how much of our authentic nature we bring to bear creatively on our relationships, or to how much of ourselves do we bring into relationships with creativity. A certain degree of spontaneity, creativity, and authenticity in our relationships brings joy and happiness and a sense of creative fulfillment in life. Venus-Saturn here might be speaking for Scorpios to that level of things. Do you feel creatively fulfilled? Socially, emotionally, romantically, and creatively, do you feel like your interactions with other human beings are joyful and happy? Or do you feel held back or stifled or bored or frustrated? Or are you reaching for forms of creative fulfillment that are inauthentic or are like medications? The 5th house, for example, might be a place where we're gambling or drinking in order to take care of ourselves, or we're having promiscuous sex with people that don't really care about us, so that we might end up getting our feelings hurt by. I have no judgments about who people want to sleep with, but with Venus-Saturn in this house, the question really has to do with maturing in our ability to have meaningful, joyful connections with other people, and healthy modes of creative self-expression that bring that level of sensual, happy fulfillment. This is the work for Scorpios this month, or this week, I should say, with this transit. All right. Going on to Sagittarius, we have Venus and Saturn conjoining in the 4th house, the place of home and family, of roots, and the private sphere of life. With Venus-Saturn, I wonder to what degree Sagittarians are feeling hurt inside. I wonder to what extent Sagittarians are dealing with a certain degree of heartache or loss or whimsical, melancholic feelings. The 4th house can be a place that's very inward, but maybe not everybody sees it. So for Sagittarians, I can't help but wonder what kinds of romantic, angsty yearnings are going on inside of you right now. Are they being seen? Do they have a healthy outlet for expression? Are you holding back some of your desires, or are you feeling guilty because of what you want or desire? I also wonder about the kinds of things happening around the topics of home, family, marriage, relationships. That 4th house can be so domestic and so basic when Venus is there, where it's literally just pointing to the most private, personal relationships in our lives, usually home and family, and that can extend with Venus to the realm of marriage and home. Venus-Saturn could reflect some hardships or more serious moments around those topics for Sagittarians coming up. Now, again, it's a brief transit. It's not like the world's longest transit, but it is very powerful. I think it's also interesting for all of us to consider that Venus is retrograding, and therefore we'll be revisiting some of these themes from the Venus-Saturn conjunction, because Venus's retrograde will bring it into contact with Saturn, the north node of the moon, later this spring, or if you're in the southern hemisphere, fall. If you're a Capricorn rising, the Venus-Saturn conjunction takes place in the 3rd house. And here I just can't help but wonder how we are trying to express ourselves creatively, verbally, mentally, emotionally. This is a house that has so much to do with our need to bring what is inside of us out into the world through creative actualization, through self-expression, through speech, through mind, through skill, through intellect. And Venus-Saturn in this house may have you feeling and needing to say some things that are more serious or weighty or real. There's like a gravitas to what's on your mind and how you need to communicate it right now. Another way of thinking about this might be that there's things happening in the realm of siblings or family relationships, like cousins, aunts, and uncles sometimes show up in this house. Short journeys or travel, and maybe travel with Venus and Saturn in mind. For example, going to spend time with a sibling because they're going through a divorce. Something where it's a little weightier maybe. Venus and Saturn can also come together in the third house to suggest that it's important that right now you honor the mental space you're in with respect to Venus Saturn. If you feel like reading deeper, more existential art or poetry or literature, or if you're taking in themes that are a little bit more serious, but also beautiful, this kind of melancholic mood from Venus and Saturn is normal. And it's something that you might need to let flow through you, to learn from, and to speak into the world somehow. All right. With respect to the Aquarius sun and rising, we have Venus and Saturn conjoining in the second house, place associated with our wealth, money, assets, skills, abilities, anything that we're in possession of or that we have to cultivate, build, and develop that we can call ours. Venus Saturn in this house may speak to a combination of where you feel that you have a lot of something and where you feel that you have a little of something. The combination of the two things can make you feel like, one hand is full, the other hand is empty. Venus and Saturn together here may also represent a more serious commitment or desire to invest in things that are Venusian. If that is investing in a musical instrument, or a little bit more expensive item that reflects a more serious desire, I'm going to get a nice piano because I'm really going to start practicing. Investments that reflect a serious commitment to something Venusian. This is also the kind of transit that comes about when someone says, look, I don't have the most money in the world, but I'm going to make a big investment to buy an engagement ring for the woman I love, that kind of thing. Venus Saturn in this house can also reflect just changes around money and finances that are more of a focus right now, and maybe the intersection between things like money, finances, and relationships. Finally, we'll put Pisces on the ascendant. And for Pisceans out there, this is taking place in your first house. In the first house, we're really thinking about character, body, behavior, identity, and maybe our innate sense of what makes us us. I am who I am because I am this. I am that. The house is called Dharma. The word Dharma, you think of things like fire. Fire cannot be fire without being heat and light. Water cannot be water without being wet and fluid. So the things that make us essentially us, without which we are not us, are really reflected in all the Dharma houses, part of my masterclass series we're looking at right now. But also in the first house, we're thinking about those things that are most essentially us. Venus Saturn is really interesting because it might reflect some kind of relational crossroads that really has to do with your ability to be yourself or not. For example, can I exist in this relationship? Might depend on how I feel like I can be myself or not. If I can be myself, then I'm good. If I can't be myself, then I might need to get out of a relationship. Venus Saturn in the first house can also reflect the desire to more seriously integrate different parts of yourself. Part of me is very serious, stoic, disciplined, quiet, contemplative, hermetic, mystical. The other part of me is very artistic and inspired and romantic and dreamy and emotional. So the Venus Saturn have some very different ways of being in the world, and yet they may be asking for you to embrace both of them. Bring them both in. They're both part of me. Venus and Saturn can also reflect an important crossroads when it comes to what you value, who you are, your sense of identity, and what the relational implications of that identity are right now. As you are changing, evolving, and getting clear about certain things within yourself or within your body or your health, there may be a way in which the consequences of those decisions and realizations lead to change in other areas of life. I would think of the relational area, certain key relationships or love life, maybe specifically with Venus, but it could be anything. All right, we're going to leave it there. Some good horoscopes for you, and hopefully this places the topics of the Venus-Saturn conjunction, and so you can take the work we've done with Venus this week along with these horoscopes and get a clearer sense of how this important transit is showing up. And don't forget, Venus's retrograde into April will push it back into Pisces, where it will meet Saturn again. So we will be coming back to this. Okay, this is good. I hope that you're having a great day and that these horoscopes were useful. We'll see you guys again on Monday. Bye, everyone.